Colleen Stan is an American woman who was kidnapped and held as a sex slave by Cameron and Janice Hooker for over 7 years. Colleen, then 20 years old, spent the majority of time in a wooden box that was under the bed that he and his wife, Janice Hooker, shared. Stan's experience was described as unparalleled in FBI history. Many of us in the United States and around the world have heard about this story. One of a young lady who made a fateful decision one night that changed her life and many others forever. Please help me welcome, and I'm going to introduce you all to the girl in the box. Colleen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
What an absolute pleasure it is for me to sit down face to face with somebody who has so much information to keep people that are watching safe. So before this night, in your early 20s, you had a rough first beginning, and do you think that played a role in allowing yourself that night to hitchhike?
Yeah, I had hitchhiked before, but always with someone else, like with a friend, and never for that long of a distance, just around town, you know. And
how far were you trying to hitchhike that
I
day?
was actually going from Eugene, Oregon to Westwood, California, which is up in the mountains east of Red Bluff, up by Lake Almanor.
Okay.
So I don't know what the mileage was, but you know,
the longest distance
it
you've
was
ever...
several hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, you had said something profound to the producers earlier about you had been offered a ride prior to taking theirs. Tell me about that.
Well, at Red Bluff, I had to go on Highway 36. So I was up on Highway 36 trying to get a ride, and the first car that stopped was a carload of guys. I believe there were, I remember right, there was 5 guys in the car. And they were like, oh, yeah, we'll take you wherever you want to go, you know. And I was like, no, I don't think so.
So red flags went up for you?
Yes, so I did not accept a ride. Well, then a young couple stopped, and they just said, well, we're not going that far, when I told them where I was going. So I thanked them, and they went on their way. So then, you know, 10, 15 minutes goes by, and this young couple with a baby stop. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're going up there. We'll give you a ride, you know. And I'm like, great. So I hop in.
You know, how profound is that we wait for a couple with a baby, and all of a sudden, the safety, you've got a couple with a baby.
Well, yeah. I mean, here was these people. They were about my age, you know, young couple. He's looking like he just got off work. He was looking kind of dirty and greasy, and you know, and she's just looking like, you know, the housewife mother holding their little baby. This is 1977, so you know, before the car seats and the seat belts and all that. So she's actually holding her 8-month-old child on her lap in the front seat. So I look in and think, oh, okay, a nice young family. You know, and they're like, oh, yeah, we're going up there. We'll give you a ride. No problem. So I'm thinking, this is safe. This is good. These are young people, young family.
And looks can be so deceiving because, as you all know at home, Cameron Hooker as well as Janice Hooker turned out to be what a lot have labeled monsters. What happens next is truly horrifying. the beginning of a 7-year nightmare when Colleen heard a voice telling her to run. After they picked you up, you rode for about how long before you stopped at the gas station?
Oh, it was maybe 20, 25 minutes outside of Red Bluff is a little community called Paynes Creek.
Correct.
So I took my stuff and I went into the restroom to change and wash up a little, so then what happened while I was in the bathroom was I had I had an encounter with God, but I didn't know I was having an encounter with God.
So you're in the bathroom at this gas station, and a lot of people know this as our gut or our intuition,
Right.
or spirit, and you now know it was God coming from inside. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I washed up and I changed and I'm looking in the mirror and this voice, audible voice, is speaking to me and says, jump out the window, run, and never look back. And I can see the window behind me and, looking through it, and I'm like, what? And so the strange thing was that this voice was not coming from out here. It was coming from within me. And it was coming from my spirit, my God spirit, that I didn't even know I had inside me.
So this voice is telling you,
Yeah.
open up the window of this bathroom in the gas station and run and never look back.
Yeah.
Not just once.
The exact words were three times, audibly, the Lord said to me, jump out the window, run, and never look back. So in my mind, I'm like, why? This doesn't make sense. This is crazy. I'm trying to reason, why should I do this? These people are giving me a ride. I'm going where I want to go. And so
You ignored
I
it.
even looked out the window. I could see the grass and the trees and all the stuff back behind this building. And but I'm just like, why? This doesn't make sense. And so I said, no, and then I went and I got back in the car.
And that was one of the most fateful decisions of your life.
Yeah, that was, if ever I've had a moment of regret in my life, that was a big moment of regret.
So, we have so much more to talk about, but, for people that are watching at home and all of you that have children and young adults that are, early 20s, what message do you have to our viewers and people listening to your story about that voice?
Well, I just think if God speaks to you, even if you don't know God, and I didn't then, and so I didn't understand that it was God speaking to me. But if you have that gut feeling, they call it, or if God speaks to you audibly, or even if it's just that still small voice, that they talk about in the Bible, pay attention. God was trying to warn me because I was looking at the outward appearance of these people. He knew their hearts were evil, and God was looking at their hearts, and God was trying to save me from having to go into captivity and from having to experience all this horrible, evil stuff that these people did to me. But I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't know it was God, and I chose to ignore it. So then what ended up happening after that was just that, God was there with me throughout the whole ordeal.
And we're going to talk more about that. For all of you guys at home, again, I think the message here is listen to, you can call it intuition, you can call it your gut, we can call it spirit, we can call it God. Please listen, because there's a lot more to this story when we come back. So all of you at home, again, we have the pleasure of having Colleen Stan, who was abducted nearly over 30 years ago by two captors, Cameron Hooker and Janice Hooker. Cameron faced and was sentenced to 104 years in prison. That is something we're going to talk about as well, because at the end of this show, you're going to find out where he's at now and how he was offered parole. But before I do, we had talked about that gas station moment and the voice that you heard telling you to run.
Yes.
You got back in the van.
In the car, yeah.
In the car.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
Well, so they continued driving up the mountain, and so we didn't get very far, maybe 5 minutes away from Paynes Creek, whatever. And all of a sudden his wife says to him, "Oh, isn't that the road?" Well, there was a dirt road coming up on the left. It didn't have any signs or anything. And he says, "Oh, yeah, I think it is." And so he starts slowing down to turn on this road, and they said, "Well, we came up here to check out some ice caves. Is it all right with you if we stop and check out these ice caves?" Well, I was just thankful that they were giving me a ride. So I said, "Yeah, I don't care. I just really want to get to my destination before dark." And so they were like, "Oh no, it won't take very long. We'll get you there before dark." And okay. So I was looking around like, well, I don't see any signs that say, ice caves on this road, or I don't see anything.
So the red flags or suspicion?
Yeah, so I'm aware of the fact that some of this stuff's not adding up, but yet not to the point where I'm like, oh, this is a bad decision.
So you weren't afraid at this point?
Stop.
You just thought they were going to go check
Yeah,
out the caves?
I just kind of went along, So they pull over on this dirt road and go far enough down the dirt road, probably a half mile or so, and so that we're away from the highway, and there's nothing on this road. There was a little stream that ran beside it on the left side, and so he pulls over, and his wife and the child, they barrel out of the car, and they go down, and I'm still sitting in the back seat, and I can see the lady and the little child playing like in the water, in this little stream. And I'm thinking, well, where'd that guy go? And I don't see him, and all of a sudden he throws the seat forward and jumps in the back and has a big knife and puts it to my throat. And he tells me, "Put your hands above your head." And I just froze, and my brain was like, whoa, what's going on? And so he took the knife and he was pushing it harder into my throat, and he said, "I told you to put your hands above your head." So finally, the second time, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's going to kill me. I throw my hands above my head. He grabs my arms, throws them behind my back. He's got handcuffs, and handcuffs my hands together behind my back, and then takes the knife and puts it back to my throat and asks me, "Are you going to do what I say?" And I'm thinking, oh, I don't have any choice here. And I said yes.
It's too late to run, and her worst fears are realized when we come back.
Held at knife point, Colleen had no choice but to do as they said.
At that moment, how do you keep it together?
I was just so scared. I was just, you know how they say you just freeze. You're just like petrified. And so I was just, I don't know, it seemed like there were 100 things running through my mind. And like, is he going to kill me? Who are these people? Oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? You know? And so he proceeded to gag me and blindfold me and tie my ankles together. And he had all this stuff with him. I mean, looking back on it, to me, it was like they were out hunting for someone.
For you.
They had all this stuff with them to do all this. I mean, who goes around with a big knife and handcuffs and rope and chains? And oh, the last thing he did was he put this box over my head that he called a head box, and it was just a wooden box. It had like hinges on one end, and then it had a hole, so it kind of went over like a clamshell over your head, and it had a hole for your neck, so it would completely shut down, and he could latch the hinges, and so you couldn't see anything, you could hear, but not very much, and so anyways, I found out he made this so that, like, if I screamed or, you know, it was just to take away senses. So then, so they lived in a house that had a little basement, and so he marched me down there that first night, and they were keeping me down there, and so then he constructed a box later that was a little bit bigger than like a coffin and kept me in there. And that's why the media's called me the girl in the box.
And he kept you in there periods for 23 hours at a time sometimes, is that
Yes,
right?
yes. He would come down generally at night after he got off work and bring me food, usually like leftovers from whatever they had, or maybe a sandwich or something, and give me some water, and he brought a bedpan down there and sat it on a chair, and so I'd have to use the bedpan in front of him, and of course he had removed all my clothing the first night. And
I want to take a moment just for a second, because a lot of you at home that are watching might not understand that this was a situation that him and his wife decided to make an agreement that his sick desires were not going to be fulfilled by his wife, so she allowed him to find somebody that he could abuse. However, there was a clause.
yeah.
Was it that he could do anything he wanted, just not sex? Tell me.
Right. So they had a pact between them that she wanted a child, and he wanted, he called it sex slave, somebody, which, you know, but you can't have sex with them. but she, because they were married, she said, well, the sex was reserved for her. And, but she agreed to it because she wanted someone who could take the pain and whatever, and so that she wouldn't have to go through all the torture and pain.
Janice Hooker agreed to allow her husband to have sex with Colleen when we come back. Even though the kidnappers had agreed to not have sex with Colleen, Janice eventually gave her husband permission.
He took me up and he tied me on their bed. And so they were both on the bed, and he jumped on top of me and he's raping me, and she jumped out of the bed, and there was a bathroom off their bedroom, and I could hear her in there throwing up. And I figured she was throwing up because of what was happening. But I later found out she was pregnant, and so might have been a combination of the two. And so he jumps off of me.
That was the beginning of...
Right. So then after that, it didn't mean that he didn't ever rape me again. He just didn't do it in front of her anymore.
Which now just opened the floodgates for everything.
Right. So...
And I want to put things in perspective, because a lot of you at home maybe have heard of the story, but there's an association, and he made you sign a contract based on the company. And the company is a very, very scary thing. Tell me about that.
Well, I would compare it to like modern day, like cartels, mafia, whatever. So he made this organization, you know, he said it was worldwide, and he belonged to it, and they were all slave owners, and they were all belonged to this organization because the organization protected them. And so like if a slave ran away, they would find them and bring them back and torture them and whatever they had to do to get the person to comply. And if they couldn't get the person to comply, they could kill you. And so anyways, he made it very clear that this company was there for his protection, and that these people that belonged to it came from all walks of life. And I mean, it could be anybody. It could be a doctor, it could be a lawyer, it could be a police officer.
And the level of fear that it puts in their victims, because not only you get past him, but now you think the whole world is against you.
Right. So this gave him a lot of power. Of course, my family was threatened, you know, that if I should ever contact them or anything, people could be hurt, people could be killed, or anybody else. If I reached out to anyone and it got back to them, then people would be hurt or could be killed, you know, and it would be my fault because I was stupid enough to reach out to someone.
And it's so important for everybody and our viewers to understand that he made you sign that contract. He put such a level of fear. So you've got layer of fear above layer of fear above
Right.
another layer of fear.
Right.
You know, we talk about Stockholm Syndrome, we talk about a few things, but we're talking about levels of fear that a lot of us at home just don't and cannot understand.
Right.
But what he did is he manipulated your freedom. And he said, in turn, by obeying me, being my slave, doing what I say, knowing that the company exists, we're going to give you some liberties. We might even let you go outside. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back on this next segment.
Okay.
The Jack Show is sponsored by HSMC.